Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here. Welcome, Jesse. Welcome, Rayfel. Good to see you this morning. Good to see everybody on the stage. My name is Brittanie Campbell-Turner, CEO and founder of Constructor. I'm the founder of the Prop Tech Club, and this morning we are, as every Thursday, discussing as the Lean Construction Roundtable. Many very interesting, fulfilling, helpful things. And this is probably one of my most exciting times of the week. Um, but just wanted to let you guys know we are live. We are sharing to YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And we're going to go ahead and put the Clubhouse link in the chat right now. If you have any interest in joining, we will make that accessible to you. But yeah, we're going to get into a really great discussion. Welcome, Anthony. Uh, with that, I will hand it off to Felipe, who has something prepared for us.
Good morning, all the beautiful people across planet Earth. My name is Felipe Engineer Manriquez. I am the CEO, founder, and host of the EBFC Show, the Easier, Better for Construction podcast, where we're bringing guests from all over planet Earth, up and down the supply chain, that are sharing their stories of how they're making our industry even better. So join us. That show drops every 2 weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'd like to go around and do some quick introductions, and then I want to talk about how the world of design is changing. I'm going to share a couple of lean principles and talk specifically about designers, since they are the first, typically, in line that cuts the whole process loose to allow people like myself to get out there and go build something. So, quick introductions. Let's go to John next.
Boy, I don't know how to follow that. John Zahara, Vice President of Integrated Facilities Solutions. We are an owner's representative program management firm in just north of Chicago. And I like to, I guess my other job is talking about lean coaching, lean, whatever you could think of. It's what I think about and what I do most of my day. What I read about, what I see in the world, and so this is a great 2-hour conversation that I'd love to join every Thursday morning. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. Mr. Jesse.
Well, good morning, y'all. I'm Jesse. I'm the host of the Learnings and Missteps podcast, Lean Maniac, and I get to spend my free time helping people make their day just a little bit better.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jesse. Good morning. Sana, my fellow Californian. Good morning.
Good morning. So I'm Sana Linding. I am a Director of Product Development and Marketing at BCC. We manufacture electronic components, so not the construction world. But I've been loving lean for, 20 years or more. And it's agile, it's lean, it's design thinking, whatever you call it again, right? How can you improve and actually improve people's life and work much smarter? I think that's my approach.
Yes, I love that approach, Sana. I'm so happy to see you here. Can't wait to hear from you even more. Let's go to Hussein.
Good morning, all. My name is Hussein Hodayb. I'm a construction project engineer, master project management, master construction management, CM Lean, and recently, thanks to Felipe, Scrum Master. Still unemployed, but taking the time to increase my knowledge and listening to all your wisdom here. Thank you.
Thank you for joining, Hussein. We'll keep you busy today. Don't you worry. Stephanie, good morning.
Good morning. I'm Stephanie, and I am a construction technology advisor and founder of Intelligent Construction Opportunities. I started this company because I identified gaps between the features that are created by software developers who don't generally have real life experience or context for the features they are enabling and developing. And I'm here to listen and understand how lean fits into the big picture and how we can start to close some of these gaps.
Beautiful. Rayful, good morning. Good to see you again.
Hey, good morning. Good to see you all. I am just here in observation of the Lean Construction Roundtable, and I wonder how is some of the upcoming projects that are being signed off on the $1 trillion packages. How do you all see that affecting uh, this country? How do you see getting access to that? So I'll just land there.
Yeah, that's a beautiful question, Rayful. I've got some insights I can share from my conference last week on that topic, and then I can dive in because it does set a good picture. So, ladies and gentlemen, imagine, thank you, Rayful. That's a perfect example of what we want. We want some questions and dialogue. If you've got something, if you're down there listening, Andrew and Anthony, Christian, and you want to ask a question, just raise your hand and one of the moderators will bring you on stage. We'll just find a good spot and let you ask your question, and then off we go. So imagine the world is changed forever. There's been a global pandemic. If you're listening to this on the replay and you're like, what? There was a pandemic in 2020 and 21? Yes, there was. It'll be temporary, like all their pandemics someday. Right now, we're in it. And so I got to hear from an economist last week in Orlando talking about the state of where we are locally in the United States and internationally abroad, as we have a very connected supply chain. And here in the United States, we now have a shift in our government towards infrastructure packaging, which Rayful is talking about. And there have been some bills proposed and passed to improve the infrastructure in many different areas across the United States. And what that bill is going to do is completely ignore the current supply and demand curve for construction labor and resources happening here in the US and in many other places. When the pandemic hit the United States, as it did many countries around the world, the government chose action to stop and pause many different industries. Construction was deemed essential, and so it got to continue with many modifications. Not all projects continued without interruption. Many were affected by COVID-19 and had to pause. So, sitting today, even before this package was signed in and these funds start to get released, Rayful, we are sitting at a nearly 1 million plus unfilled labor jobs in construction. There are over 1 million jobs unanswered, unfilled, because of such high demand at current levels now for projects already in play. And now we have an influx of more projects from the government here in the United States for infrastructure projects. Arguably, some are very badly needed, versus others, roads and bridges that haven't been tended to in a while. Some of those packages and others, but we still are sitting here with a big labor gap. And even if we win those, how will we close the gap? Where will the workers come from? We've got only so many people coming into the industry every year, and we have a greater number of people leaving the industry, either by retirement or for other reasons. So I propose, Rayful, that we use lean construction methodologies and techniques so that we can be more effective and efficient with what we have, so that we can scale and serve more customers with our teams without overburdening our people. So with that, Rayful, I want to dive into this design topic. And if you've got any other questions, ladies and gentlemen, please unmute and ask away. And before I start, I just want to say that I noticed that we've got another guest on stage that needs to do an introduction. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Good morning. Okay, so I just came in the room, so I'm just doing an introduction, but that's all I need to do because y'all do that right when I get on stage, and I have
That's
no idea if you can
all you need
reset
to
the
do is
room.
just say
Okay,
who you are, please.
okay. I'm Jennifer. I work for Robbins Morton, who is a healthcare general contractor. My role is a full-time lean practice leader, and my goal is just to continue to elevate people and better our industry and keep moving it forward so that we can be viable in the future. There you go.
I love that. Jennifer's also a culture warrior. Follow Jennifer
Yeah.
on social media for ripples of impact, please, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, see that? Jesse's cheering for you so loud. All right, perfect. So many designers dislike schedules, but as recently as we've seen in the pandemic, they've pivoted and started welcoming pool planning so they can stay organized together, even though they are very far apart. I'm going to share one specific story of a team in the southern United States, a design team for a hospital project that when the pandemic first hit back in February, March, and things kind of shut down in March, their project was put on hold by the hospital leadership for about a month just to see what was going to happen. Could they restart? Would there still be demand for this type of hospital in a new city where this hospital client currently was not working? They currently had no infrastructure in a new city in southern United States. And this was going to be a new hospital that was going to treat children and other patients needing health care somewhere in the south of the US. And so a lot of designers will say things like, design is an iterative process. And that's usually in defense to why they can't schedule or shouldn't schedule. And so we spent quite a bit of time working with this team. The hospital project eventually was decided to continue. And there is competition in this market with another hospital. And the leadership made an announcement to the marketplace and said, we are committed to building this new hospital in this city, and we are going to hold our opening date. And at the time that they made that announcement, we had lost effectively about 45 days where no work had proceeded. So this team at this point, just with the time paused, has to make up 45 days, 45 calendar days of schedule time to meet what leadership needs to do in order to stay competitive in this new city where they're expanding to. And at that time, the design schedule, even before the pause, was not on schedule. Yeah, let that sink in. I started off by saying that many designers dislike schedules, and that design as an iterative process is a deflection or something that is said often to support why traditional scheduling or linear scheduling, as they also will sometimes say, doesn't apply to design work because it's a creative work. And sometimes creative work, oftentimes, comes in sparks and spurts, and it doesn't work in a very linear, do this, then do this type of methodology. That's the phrase I hear most often, this iterative design phrase, this creativity, when architects and engineers respond to how long some design deliverable will take to complete. Because in construction, we always want to know, when will you be done? When pushed, you might get a response from the designers, but it won't be accurate. And oftentimes, contractors assume that when they hear about 2 weeks, that if they plug 10 workdays in the schedule, then they've got a commitment, when in fact they don't. Design work and buildings are interconnected. One follows the other. Yes, design is absolutely creative work, and creative work takes time. Building owners are like any other consumer. They want to know how long it will take the second the pricing for the work settles down. And they'd like to make decisions and themselves have to bring on staff, especially in a new market. There's going to be a lot of hiring of new people to staff, in this particular example, a hospital. Some designers will tell me that putting a time limit or a schedule on their work cheapens and diminishes their creativity. This is at odds with what we are charged to do on the construction side, or if you're managing design. Even inside of design firms, we have architects managing the design as well. And some larger general contractors have design personnel managers and directors helping to manage the design as well. This is at odds with that. So this typically is an absolutely fabulous entry point to introduce the last planner system of production controls. I chatted briefly with this design team when my team pulled me in and they said, we'd like to use pull planning in order to make up time. We've heard stories that you always make up time. And I tell people, the stories are true. Yes, time will be made up. But unfortunately, you're going to have to work less and deliver more. And they're like, unfortunately, that sounds awesome. Sign me up. You still have to win people over. So we had a meeting with some of the design leaders and we talked about what pull planning was. They had no idea. They'd never heard of it. This is the Southern United States. And construction, sometimes information moves a little bit slower. And this was something developed in the 1990s. And actually, in the 1990s, developed in the oil industry of all places on projects where it was tested. And it's been used ever since all over. Still not as popular as critical path method scheduling, but it's getting there. So shout out to Glenn Ballard. Greg Howe developed this in the 1990s to make project delivery more reliable. They were working to make project schedules more reliable so that people could schedule easier with more reliability. This was tested with hundreds of design team partners on this project. And I've seen Last Planner System personally, used it in heavy civil work, engineering wastewater treatment plants, schools, complex hospitals, and even alcohol, spirit, and beer production sites internationally. Sometimes people just refer to it as pull planning, which invokes images of people gathered together in offices or in job sites, standing in a sea of sticky notes and drawing sheets and whiteboards, things posted on the wall, and designers waving me off saying, Felipe, it doesn't work in design. It absolutely does work in design. It just hasn't worked in design with you yet. You might not have been onboarded yet. And that's why I'm here. What is your current process? The first thing I do when working with a new team that's resistant to starting with Last Planner System is first to understand what is their current process. And I listen with curiosity, not with judgment, to hear exactly what they do, how they do it, why they do it, and then the thing that they never expect, questions. Yes, I ask lots of questions to clarify their process so that I can see through their eyes what their process is. And I ask them also to share with me what kind of results do they get with their process. And even more importantly, do they like those results? Are those results acceptable? Is it okay to get those types of results in design with architects, engineers, civil engineers, mechanical, electrical engineers, interior designers, all designers? Is it okay to get those results at the expense of sometimes burning out your teams, sometimes making your teams work day and night, sometimes making your teams work 7 days a week through crunch time, quote unquote crunch time, which seems to be all the time? And so they'll often tell me, well, we never thought about that. It's like, well, that's what I think about. Can I share one lean construction principle with you? And after I've been listening for such a long time that they're just happy to take a break and drink some water, they say, yes, go ahead and talk for a little bit. And so the first principle I share is respect for people. And I share that respect for people doesn't mean that we just give in to everything that people on the team want. It doesn't mean that we just get beanbag chairs and buy smoothies for everybody every day, and it's hugs every day when you walk into work. It doesn't mean that at all. Respect for people means that I value the worth of each individual person. I honor them as a human being. I respect their individual humanity, and I need them to enrich this project team and myself. That's the level of respect that we're talking about when we say respect for people. And so, with that, they're like, well, that sounds great. How do you do it? I say, this is how I do it. I never disagree with their experiences. I'll share some case study examples on how we can do it. And I'll say, can we agree to do a small trial for a portion of the design? And if you like it, if you like the results, then we can scale it out with my help. I will help you. You don't have to do it by yourself. And we'll scale it to more portions of the design, so long as you see it benefiting you, your team, and especially the client. Because we don't get any kinds of, not yet, we don't get any awards for actually using Last Planner system. Maybe we should, that's an idea, Jesse. We might have to come up with some LPS awards.
Felipe, that's a beautiful point, and I've had that question asked to me point blank. Within organizations that are on their lean transformation, there's an expectation, right, of apply the Last Planner system and transition to this production management style. And the question was, okay, so it's clear that there is no corrective consequence for people not making the transition. So what about the other side of the coin? How does the organization reward, recognize, elevate, and celebrate those that are making the transformation? And I think you're dead right, man. Like, organizations absolutely have to have a plan to celebrate and to steal our culture warriors mission of elevating people that are displaying the behaviors we seek.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jesse, for that point. And I want to just pause for a second. We've got Michael on stage. Michael, welcome to the stage. Do you have a question, Michael, or could you introduce yourself and give us your question or your comment, please?
I joined a little bit late, so thanks, Felipe. I heard some of it. I'm actually a Six Sigma black belt. I've done a lot of lean stuff, on the construction side. So I love this topic. I don't deal too much as you're talking about in the design phase. I do kind of end to end, but I deal more on the infrastructure side, and a lot of it's highly repetitive work. So, for example, when we talk about building out either, think about electric vehicles or cell towers, etc. There could be thousands to tens of thousands of units that we put across the board in a year. And so with that, it is important to your point about the design aspect is, sitting down with everybody and going through and making sure that you have what we call a set of standards, right? And so I love what you talk about the human aspect, about bringing everybody together, sharing their values. And so, my thing I always tell people is leave your ego at the door. We're here to get a job done. We want to respect, and everybody has a different, state of, opinion and all that. But what's really important also is that once we agree as a team, we all have to be on board. And that's another point I'd like to make, that, hey, you can all disagree, but once we agree, this is how we're going to either build it, etc. We all have to get on board and execute accordingly. And I agree, about the planning, component of it. We need a very structured plan, because that affects material, that affects labor, right? And you need to, when we're building tens of thousands of units, there's a big effect if the design's off, if you get the raw material, and that can just have a significant domino effect. And my last piece is more about kind of like upfront planning. To your point is, the quote I love is for every dollar you spend up front, you save $4 on the back end. And that really comes back to the design phase. So I love this topic, and Felipe, all the things you said, I really agree with, and this is a great room. So thanks everybody, and I'm Mike.
Thank you, Mike. And Mike, when you use this method, and maybe you just haven't used it yet with design. It's awesome in design. You can actually let the egos come in the door, and they don't have to even get checked. I welcome the egos to come to the room, and I always like people to bring their entire selves, ego and all. It makes it for much more colorful meetings. So on this particular example, and like Mike was talking about how things in design can have a domino effect through the whole thing, back to the story, the client had paused the design for 30 days due to COVID uncertainty. And when the project restarted, that 30-day pause had a cumulative 2-month delay based on the last approved owner schedule because you had people that, like I said, construction was deemed essential, not everything paused. So some of the people on the team had to get reallocated to other projects that were still in flight. Only this one single project for this team was paused for a month. And so bringing people back from other jobs and making the changes to staffing ended up causing a 2-month delay, including subconsultants on the design or sub-tier different design partners. Like there was a big civil engineering component of this project in some site make ready work. And that was the big first part starting. So 30-day pause ended up being a 2-month delay. If you're out there as an owner and you're thinking, but well, I only paused the job for a month. Well, you may have, but it's not like people just sat on the bench and waited for you to come back online. You created uncertainty, and people have to still be billable. They still have to run a business. They still have to cover their overhead. And so it's not day for day delay when things are paused. Just keep that in mind. But don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, there is light at the end of the tunnel. The team galvanized because they committed to the mission of what this hospital was seeking to do, which was to provide necessary and essential health care to some of our most vulnerable populations and children. The team galvanized and they said, we will make up this time. We have to do this to serve this underserved community of people in this metropolitan area. They galvanized on delivering promises to start treating patients in less than 3 years. They decided, without even planning yet, that the mission was so important, the purpose was so good, that they were going to commit. So, traditional planning and scheduling methods, historically taught in design school, engineering schools, construction management schools, such as the critical path method schedule, failed to accelerate design deliverables, failed even when more than a dozen designers were added to the project. Adding more people just makes the project later. I can't remember. I think it's Moore's Law, Moore, named after a software developer that coined the phrase Moore's Law. Adding more people to a project already late makes the project later. It's true in software, and I've seen it true in construction as well. And those of us with experience on large construction projects know that when you add people to projects to accelerate or spend or invest in overtime, you have diminishing returns typically after 2 weeks or thereabouts, depending on the size and complexity of the project. It's not a one-for-one increase in throughput. It often slows things down even further. So the architect was sold on trying Last Planner system with the civil engineering package, even without the client. They decided, yes, we have to do this. We have to make this time up. And we need to help our civil engineering partner deliver. Later, the client was added. And I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, on this project, once the client experienced Last Planner system of production controls with this team, they never, ever missed a pool planning meeting. And they're often one of the highest value contributing people in the room. So if you're doing this on your own and you're thinking like, we need to get our house in order first before we bring in the customer, I completely disagree. I 100% say you should bring in the customer and learn with them. It's probably the first time seeing this and experiencing it. And even if they have some prior experience, why not learn together on your project? Why not have the right conversations with the right people at the right time? Don't work extra hard just because you want to be perceived as being really good. You already are really good. That's why they hired you. They hired you because you're awesome, ego and all. So they agreed to do a small safe to fail experiment with the civil engineering, and we are going to show them how we can increase value delivery. Many design and construction professionals, like I said, do learn some topics of critical path method scheduling, but almost none learn last planner system. So the first thing we have to do is onboard the team. And like I said in the beginning, we started with onboarding leadership first. We had to have the leaders comfortable with what the system is, what the responsibilities of their people will be, so they can create an environment that enables their team to use last planner system. If you don't take the time as somebody who knows what's going on and show people what it's going to be to make them comfortable, you are failing to start. You're getting off to a wrong start. So take the time to make the leaders comfortable. It might take 2 meetings, it might take 3 meetings, it might take a face to face, and then agree on a small, safe to fail experiment so that we're going to minimize any potential damages and we can radically increase the shortness of the learning curve for the greater team. So, my first experience I shared with the leaders was I had started using the last planner system over a decade ago in construction, and I saw the power of intense collaboration. I became hooked, and I thought I should use this all the time. And today, coincidentally, like some of us here, I'm an approved instructor for last planner system of production controls with the Lean Construction Institute. So holler at me, shout at me, hit me up on social media if you got more questions on what it is. I probably will say what it is in a second. So anyway, back to the story. So we're shifting. We have to unlearn some bad habits, especially about making commitments. A trained facilitator, an LPS, will hear what bad commitments sound like. So you'll start to do your pool planning session. We'll talk about what should we do, what can we do, what will we do, what did we do, and then the best part, what did we learn doing it? And those 5 connected conversations tie to more traditional scheduling methodologies like milestone planning. Every project has at least 2 milestones, a start date and an end date. And so that's the what should we do conversation where we expose the major milestones of the project to the team, and you have to do it with the team. If this team, like so many schedules, are put together with a few people, those few people are using their past perspective and experience to create a plan. And let's just call it what it is, a rough plan of what it could be. When you bring the entire team in, now you have the genius of your squad, and you need to expose those milestones to all of your geniuses in your squad so that you can see, is this milestone sequence correct? And it sounds like, if you've never been in this experience, sounds like, wow, this could take, what does it take? Like 8 hours? We had 50 people. It took 10 minutes. That's all we had to take. We had everything visually shown with sticky notes, digital sticky notes, because this was still during the peak of COVID in 2020. And we had the sticky notes from the team, from the schedule. We used the baseline schedule, and we just showed the major milestones on a simple chart of like, here's a line, here's a sticky note, here's the calendar above. Is this the right sequence? And we walked through. And when we did that walkthrough in 10 minutes, we found that many of the people on the team had no idea what these milestones actually entailed, because the descriptions of the milestones from the schedule were just too vague. They were too vague, and getting that clarity on what these milestones were actually changed the milestone sequence based on the genius of the room. And we gained in the schedule just talking about the milestones for 10 minutes. And we had 50 people on a Zoom call. It was incredible. And this is the every time story. This is not like an outlier. This is my experience every time with teams in construction and in design. You have to socialize the milestones. I hope that gets on, if someone's taking notes or drawing, socializing the milestones is like that's a cool little phrase. I don't know what that would look like. Sana, you help me with your imagination, and I want to start to draw what that looks like too. Socializing the milestones.
I'll try my best.
And so we wanted to make it easy as possible for the team. So we created an environment with leaders to set up a space where they could expose their thinking. So we used a technology called Mural, but you can use, it's Mural. You can use any type of digital technology where people can, it's essentially a digitally whiteboard. And we had sticky notes that were digital that anybody on the team could move. Anybody could move it. I set that board so it was wide open, just like a real life whiteboard. And we let people move things around and talk. And that's what should we do. And then we decided to start at the beginning. What a great place to start. So we started with the first package, which was the civil engineering package that set so many other things loose on the project. And we focused and got commitments from the team to design in sequence so that we were not going to worry about carpet or interior terrazzo or interior paint colors on this time on the project. As I said, we have 3 years to design and deliver this project. So we got commitments from the design team to work in sequence. That was big because oftentimes you will get people working out of sequence if they're not busy. And that's just what happens. That's another law. We'll call that Parkinson's law, and it's named after a British bureaucrat. Can't remember his first name, but Parkinson said, work expands to meet the time envelope allowed. So if we give people 3 years to design something, guess what? They take about 3 years. If we give people 2 months to design something, they take about 2 months. So deadlines do have their place, but they have to still be reasonable. Remember, our first principle, the only one I've shared so far, is respect for people. So be mindful of what deadlines you impose on your team and why you impose it. So
So that, I
go ahead,
mean,
Brittanie.
Felipe, I'm loving the story. I just want to chime in here and reset the room for those who have just joined or who are listening online. We are actually talking about, and there's so many ways to describe this I'm putting on the screen. Really, design is an iterative process, and one of the ways that Felipe is digging to in the story is how Last Planner can be used in the design process by doing some simple dialogue about what's important to execute and what that sequence of events looks like in order to actually just respect people. Um, simply enough. I do, Felipe, we're coming up here 40 minutes. If you get to a point in your story, would love to just understand the experience here. We have a ton of experience on the stage of what others have experienced from a design perspective, in terms of applying either the Last Planner system or other methodologies to help them in the design phase. Or if anybody has any questions, did want to open it up for individuals to ask questions in terms of how lean can be applied in design as well. So with that, Felipe, just want to hand it back off to you.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Brittanie, that's a perfect transition. I was coming to the punchline of what the team actually did because this was started a year ago. And yes, Brittanie, please, everybody, ask your questions, share your experiences. So what this team did is they, in this first phase, in the safe to fail experiment, they pulled the schedule forward 2 months. They gained more than 60 days back. They made up all the delay from the pause during the COVID uncertainty and delivered a high level, highly coordinated civil design that cut loose many multiple permits in the work and other design phases. And then they continued to use the Last Planner system for the rest of the year. And they are now, happy to say, transitioning into Last Planner system for construction. They have broken ground and they are continuing to use it. Today, they enter in construction with a 4-month gain on the schedule How often does that happen when we start construction 4 months early? We've estimated that the design savings alone was worth $1.3 million of labor savings for that team. So proud of that team. And they will be presenting at the annual Lean Construction Institute Congress happening October 19th this year. So if you're listening, follow me. You'll see posts about that. And you can definitely direct message me for more information about that. And with that, let's hear from some other last planner aficionados, either in design or construction, or if you have questions, we'll take questions as well.
I'd like to ask a question.
Go for it, Rafel.
So the essence of this, is it really coming down to just a matter of communicating, project implementation schedules? Is it really more than just an enhanced level or optimum level of communications that's saving a lot of time?
It is built on the best practices from all different industries back in the day. They looked at different industries, like they specifically studied high performing teams, and they found that these high performing teams had common threads, Rafel. And they found that some of the common threads, you could repeat this with high reliability. So there is a sequence of going through these conversations of should, can, will, did, learn, and using visual controls such as sticky notes or digital software. It can be done analog or digitally, and having meaningful, impactful conversations in a particular order that yields these type of results every single time. And it does, yes, boils down to communication, but the values and principles in play enable even greater results. Like the results I'm sharing here are the typical results I see, but the way we set the intention in the beginning with respect for people and some other principles as well really makes a difference, because there are many stories of people trying this and not getting these types of results. And the difference is the principles you put into play first. Great question. Does anyone else want to add to that, to Rafel's question? John, you've had a lot of experience, as has Jen, with LPS, and even Brittanie, I think.
Yeah, Felipe, I think, one of the main things I always emphasize with LPS is handoffs and how we hand off one item of work to another. And when we think about why do they call it pull planning, it's because we're trying to, we're emphasizing the pull, not the push. So in our traditional schedules, we emphasize a push plan where one person is kind of pushing the entire team, and that's where you get these delays like you were talking about. And what we're not focusing on is, what is the expectation when I hand a piece of work off to the next person? They need to, typically in a push system, they're not asking me or telling me what they need from me in order to keep their job going. I just do my job, and then they take it and go from there. And I don't really think about, and they don't think about, this handoff that occurs. And so we have to be really mindful of what the work that we're handing somebody, but also what they're asking for, requiring, and the expectation that they're asking for when we hand that off to them. So I usually, we all get upset or frustrated when we get a work product that isn't up to our standards. A lot of that is on us as the next person in line, because we didn't set a good expectation of what we wanted or needed in order for us to keep the project or process going. And so a lot of that occurs where you just make assumptions, you push what you think is the product to somebody else, and then you leave it up to them to figure out. And that's never going to be successful. That's always going to cause delays, because what's going to cause is rework. It's going to cause a hand back to you, because somebody's going to say, you didn't do this correctly. You didn't do this like how I wanted it. And they're going to look at you like you're an idiot. But half of that blame, let's call it, or half of the issue really come, or maybe more than half the issue comes because I didn't set a good expectation of what I was wanting when I got that work product handed to me. And so it's really interesting to go see the work out in the field and asking those last planners, the men and women doing the work, swinging the hammers, or even the designers when we're in the design process, like Felipe was talking about. When you ask an engineer, did you give the architect the clear expectation of what you wanted or needed when they handed this element of work to you. And they're like, well, yeah, I kind of gave them something or whatever. All that's going to tell you is they didn't do their job correctly, the engineer. And so they're going to get something that is less than what they wanted or expected, but they weren't clear on their communication or expectation. That is a huge issue in any level of work that we're doing, even if it's in your own internal office. Anyone that day could be delivering work to you or vice versa. And think about that when you're providing something. Think about what you're providing that person and ask them, is this what you wanted? What are you expecting from me before I go and do all this work? What are you actually expecting from me? Is there a checklist you could provide me? Is there some template you could provide me so that I do this and format this the way you want it to be formatted?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, John. How about Jen and your experiences, design or construction? Like what Rayful said, is this really just a communication improvement?
This is Jennifer, and I was listening to you, Felipe, and then I was listening to John. I think one thing that is in the conversation, but maybe we haven't said it specifically, is we want to be very clear with LPS. It is not, people at a higher level coming into a room with sticky notes and going, "This is what it should be," and he's using should and would, and he's using those terms, but it is the craft workers. It is the people that are in there putting work in place that are helping create that schedule. And that's a huge, that's a huge shift from people that, oh, we've done this. I have experience with this. We've done this on our last job. So this is what it's going to take. And here's the schedule. And then, hey, we need y'all to conform to the schedule. It's getting those people that have the subject matter experts, that have the experience, that know, the manpower, that know the materials, that know what that delivery looks like, know the flow of the work. Those are the people that drive the schedule. Now, again, you're in there to do some checks and balances and make sure that it makes sense and that someone's not, throwing softballs and things like that. But we want to make sure that it's really clear that the structure of that schedule, we may have an end date, like John said, that, where we know where we have to be at a certain point, and then we pull backwards from that to make sure that everything connects and those handoffs are good. But those trades and those craft people are the ones that are helping create that schedule, and that's a huge shift from, kind of where we were before, where we created the structure and had them conform to it and make it work. So again, everything else is solid. And I just want to make sure I emphasize that for anyone that's listening and trying to understand, okay, what's the difference and how is this going to make it better? When you have the people that are putting the work in place, giving you real information and what it's really going to take versus someone that is kind of guessing or, basing it on something that they've done in the past, it completely changes, the real time, the data, the commitments, and the accountability.
Absolutely. How about you, Brittany, in your experience and the different hats you've worn? Have you seen this in design and construction, improving communication?
Absolutely. I will say this. Oftentimes when I would get involved, it would be either the same time or very close to the time an architect would be hired. And oftentimes, we're shepherding the process. And I mean, I'm on the owner side now. So I'm shepherding the process of bringing the right people on board. And so, to Jen's point, uh, one of the things that I think critically about is who are the right people to bring on board to help us identify those critical milestones that we think we know are best, but we need validation and understanding about what are the most critical pieces of the project that we know we're going to encounter in the design and know we have to solve for. But in addition to that, on the trade side, who do we need to consult and how can we get them onboarded earlier so that we can have the right kind of feedback to really lay out not only the schedule, but the strategy for the project. And so that's a lot of the thinking that I typically do. Who are the right people to bring on board and ask these questions to, so that we have the right expertise in the room, at the table, and able to contribute to the discussion. It is about better communication, but if you don't have the right people in the room, how are they going to communicate, especially as you're planning really early on in the project? I find that, I'm not the one typically doing the last planner system now, because I lead a team, and they're the ones kind of shepherding the process now. But it is about, again, coordinating and coaching my team to ask the right questions at the right time, of the team, and asking them those strategic questions of who's in the room, who needs to be in the room, how are you planning for this milestone, and what's critical about this, and asking those questions super early. So yeah, that's kind of my side of it.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you, Brittany. And I want to pivot to John. John, one of the other principles that this team does, and for those of you listening in the audience, I've done this last planner system with as little as 2 people, 2 trades, and I've done it with as many as over 100. And it's worked on projects in the thousands of dollar range all the way to the over $1 billion range. So it does scale, and there are definitely things to consider when you're scaling up and down. It is easier to do with fewer people, no doubt. And one of the principles that lets it work is this idea of flow, enabling flow and value. And as you get excited about flow, you will often encounter things hindering your flow. And I think, John, you've got some great examples of some of the typical types of waste that people encounter. You want to share what those ideas are, John, with everyone listening, so that we can improve our workflow?
Absolutely. I think the main thing with Last Planner, and Jen, you're right on. The last planners are those that are out in the field swinging the hammers, doing the actual work. The main waste that we see when we're trying to schedule a different way or do work a different way is we're underutilizing the talents of the people that are around us. And so we have to really be careful but mindful of that the men and women that are doing this work have really great ideas, and we need to empower them and that's why Last Planner system can work so well, is we are empowering them to take accountability for what they're doing and their actions, rather than having somebody just stand there and dictate to them what they're supposed to do or what they should be doing today, etc. So, I always think of the 8 wastes of construction with the acronym downtime. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. So it's DOWNTIME. What a great acronym. How crazy does it actually work? How do you actually see waste in your everyday life, in your processes, everything else? But the first letter, D, is for defects. So the challenge we always say is why do we allow defects to occur on our projects? And I'm talking about defects that we say, oh, well, the famous saying is leave it for the punch list. But when we drill down even deeper, why are we allowing people to not do a quality work product, but then hand it off to somebody else and say, well, they'll fix it? So why are we allowing that to occur on our projects? Why does that occur? I mean, that's the big question as a leader I always have, is why are we doing that? We've been doing a lot of study with my client, and my contractor, engineering, architecture team has devoted a lot of their time, unpaid by the client, but it's our time to sit down and say, how can we make ourselves better? We call it our best practices team. And we've sat down and said, how can we make ourselves better as leaders? How can we go out there and lead in a better way, with a lot of different topics? And a lot of it comes back to the initial one of defects. We talked about swinging fire doors. So putting up a fire rated frame and putting fire doors in. We spent a lot of time talking about this, months and months of time at different meetings and different subgroup meetings. We've done an A3 on this topic. We've analyzed it and we keep digging. It's not like the document is done and we put it on the shelf. We keep trying to reiterate and learn from it and do better, right? The plan, do, check, adjust, or plan, do, check, act cycle of continuous improvement. So we're trying to be better. But the point is, and the initial point I find is, when we start to dig into the root cause of why problems are occurring, why is it that we cannot install a fire rated door frame, even a 3 foot by 7 foot standard door frame, and then install a door on that door frame, a wood door on that door frame that is, let's say, a 45-minute rated wood door? And why do we still have installation failures? Why do we still have gaps at the head, the hinge side, the latch side of the door, and the bottom of the door? All of those things are not following NFPA 80, the standards for installing a fire rated door. Why is that occurring? And so the first thing I drill down to are, when I get to the bottom of our kind of root cause analysis, one of the things is we are allowing defects to occur, small defects to occur all the time. We allow it when we frame the wall and put the door frame in. We allow it when the drywaller comes in and drywalls the wall. We allow it when it's taped. We allow it when it's painted. We allow it when the floor prep happens and the flooring goes in. When the door is swung, we allow a manufacturer to not manufacture it up to standards. We allow the other trades to bump into that door frame along the way with carts and everything else and not care about what. So why are we allowing this kind of action to occur to cause defects on our projects? So I'll pause with that one. But defects is the first one, D. And the other thing I always look at is, why do we allow this kind of 10-day duration at the end of our project schedules for punch list? If we think about the Toyota production system, and this is kind of what I always go back to as my guiding principles and the guiding company that really has shown that this works at all levels in a major, massive organization, worldwide organization. They don't allow defects. They don't allow defects to occur. They empower the team to stop what we're doing and fix the problem as it occurs. They don't understand the idea of leave it for a punch list. Sure, they do a quality check when the car is finished being produced, but they quality check it every step of the way. And so why in construction have we allowed consistently over time for defects to occur and to not do anything about it? So I just want to throw that out there as the first one, as D in downtime, defects. Why do we allow this to happen on our projects as leaders? And it's frustrating to me. So, and I'm sure it is to many of them. So what do we think?
Can I chime in and try to say why we are allowing this? Because I've been in many projects worldwide, and the main reason that I've seen difference between successful in different aspects, including defects and failing, is the principles of leans, not the tool, not the use of actual usage of last planner system or whatever. Because all these projects I've been was this additional system, all of them so far. So it's the principle. When I see respect in a team, when I see trust, when I see good leadership, when I see communication going on within the team, I see less defects. Because when you respect the craft worker, when you respect the last planner, when you respect the people will give you back. When you communicate, when you sit down and you engage everyone, they will give back. But when you push things on people, they will just do whatever they want to do or can do, and give the minimum, and that's what you get. So that's in short. I mean, it's all detail, and I can go on in more detail, but in short, is respect, trust, engaging, holding accountable. It's the 5 dysfunction of a team, in short.
Right, we're allowing individuals to not be accountable for what they're saying. We're not, first of all, we're probably, for a long time, we never even asked them to actually tell us what they were going to do today, what work product they were going to be producing today. We had somebody dictating to them. The superintendent as a dictator rather than a facilitator has occurred in our industry forever. So the superintendent was the one bossing them all around, saying, you're going to do this today. And so the rush was on to get the work done that the boss was telling us to get done, rather than putting accountability where it belongs. So you'll see as we talk about all these wastes, the 8 wastes all tie together in a very fundamental way, is you're not just going to have one sitting in a vacuum somewhere. But the idea of accountability and trust and all of those things has gone on in our industry for so long, because we've had this dictator telling everyone, bring 5 people here tomorrow and you're going to install this much work for me. As a superintendent who doesn't install electrical conduit every day, why is the superintendent telling the electrician how much conduit to install today or tomorrow or whatever, and how many people to have here? Why do that is another question of why. That feeds into a waste later on down in my list about non-utilized talent. But the idea of we get defects because we're pushing the team rather than having the team tell us what they're going to produce on a daily basis. So, I mean, it's a huge issue to try to shift our minds away from this dictator role into a facilitator role. So how as we as leaders, how can we be better facilitators and not dictators? Jen, go ahead.
I just want to add, Hussein said everything you're saying. It comes down to, the behaviors and the environment that we're creating. And John, just to speak exactly to what you just said, we know that, that most of us want to be in a positive environment, and we want to be able to voice, our ideas and things like that. But please understand that because of the traditional way construction's been, like John said, with that command and control, if you just all of a sudden open up a room and go, hey, we're going to have a better culture, and we're going to listen, and we're going to ask questions, they're not just going to go rah rah, let's throw the confetti in the room. Like, it is a mindset that has to be changed. It is a culture shift that is going to take time, and starting those things by asking questions, listening to what they say, and then actually acting on things that are being said is a way to kind of start that. But it is not going to be, well, we tried it and it didn't work because nobody talked. Tried it and we're still getting work put in place bad, or we're not. There's a lot of ways to open it up and go, it didn't work, and understand that just like anything, you're turning a huge shift. A ship. It's not just we're going this way, now we're going this way. But when you're changing people's behaviors and you're changing the environment that they're in, it will impact things so far into the future if you take the time to create the right environment, to foster those behaviors, to not come at them and attack them. And, they say something and, they feel like, oh gosh, I can't say that again. You've got to create the right environment there to where they feel that they're safe to say things, but they also know that there's an opportunity there for them to add value. And if you if you buy into one thing and say, oh, we're going to do this, but your actions and what you're doing on site, not just one person, but everyone's not the same, it won't matter. You're just putting, lipstick on a pig. It's still a pig. So you've got to make sure that you are looking at everybody, and it's not just one group of people. It's every single person in how they can add value, and how, you're creating that environment for them to feel like, that they have just as much autonomy to be able to add something to it than someone else. So that's all.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as I said, I've seen things fail, but also I've seen successes in the old traditional system. Comparative successes to comparing to the failures. I'm sure that with the last planner and lean and all this, hopefully things will be much better. But I've seen some success stories, and the success story happened when you have that culture of respect, when you have the culture of trust, when you are engaging people, and you are utilizing the talents, even in the traditional system. And this led to success stories that I've witnessed. So yes, absolutely.
I have a comment here as well. So when we're designing products, we have a design brief. So what we do, we actually look at what do we not know, for this product that we're going to design, because asking question of what we do not know and then saying we have to go and learn or get the knowledge or find that person that has this expertise, that will get us back on track. So just as John said, right, then we won't get the defects because we know what we're not good at. So it's all about ask the right questions as early as you can, and then you can make a much better plan. So that's how in the design world where I am.
So I love that, and I am Adam Hoots is not on the call today, but he's taught me to be when I'm in conversations, and there's a little bit of okay, how do I get more people to engage or even get some stuff that is a little uncomfortable? How is this going to fail? And you open it up to that, and it's kind of a little scary, but it also gets things out on the table where then you can start going, okay, here is a way that we can address that, or really we already have that, we already thought through that. But sometimes all those what ifs or could haves or would haves are out there, and then they're just waiting to kind of somebody to say something later. But if you open it up like you said and create that, what is, how can it fail, or what is it that we're missing, it opens it up to where people aren't scared to sometimes say things that are a little bit negative, or a little bit that people don't like to hear that. But I think it opens up that environment for people that are willing to share those things.
Agree. Yeah. And again, right, you need to have trust each other so you can ask the questions. And I've been in my position for many years, and I still ask, how does this work? So I'm standing there as a leader and starting asking not stupid questions, but just showing, hey, let's get the dialogue. It's all about that dialogue. But you're totally right.
And it comes back down to, golly, this is the stuff that where magic happens. But it comes down to, and I believe this, every person wants to matter. Everybody wants to matter, what their work they're doing, their lives they're living. Everybody wants to matter. And when you ask that question, it's such a simple question of, like you said, how does this work? Or can you explain this? All of a sudden they have they're the expert. They're the person that has the knowledge that you're wanting them to share it. And it just opens up dialogue that sometimes people are sitting back and they've got their arms crossed. But I know I use it all the time when I see somebody that's a little bit hesitant. Hey, can you explain this to me? Because I'm not really sure about it. And all of a sudden their face changes and their body changes and their actions change, because now they're the person that you're relying on to convey some information. And it's so small, but it's so huge in the scheme of things.
So we got defects, right? We got defects out there, and we've talked a lot about why do we allow defects, why do defects occur? And it has to do with these handoffs. It has to do with how do we know that it's going to, or starting the conversation with thinking about how it's going to fail so that it doesn't fail. That's an interesting way to look at it. So in downtime, the next waste that we see is overproduction. So overproduction is really producing something at a higher level than what is required for the project, for your client, whoever you're handing work to. But it's really producing something at a higher level than is what is actually required. And one of the examples I had, I tend to actually go into the drywall world a lot when I use examples of waste that I see, and it's not because it's drywallers are wasteful. That is a major element of our construction projects. And in this case, I had an architect designing something. This is a physical therapy space where we were doing ballet bars and putting mirrors on walls and things like that. And the architect specified a level 5 drywall finish. And if you know what level 5 drywall finish, basically you're skim coating the entire wall for wallpaper and other things. So this is an architect who's taking a corporate standard for this client and putting it on a set of documents in a space where the walls don't require it, because you're going to cover them up with all kinds of things. You're not going to actually see, you're not putting wallpaper on there. It's not a beautiful corridor, anything like that. And so the question I asked as the owner's representative, or that was on the project, was, why are we doing this? Well, this is how we always do it. Well, why? Why are we? I mean, we're spending a lot of money doing this for no reason. We're going to cover all these walls up with mirrors and ballet bars and drill holes and all of it for our, rubber band supports and everything else. Why do we need to spend all of this money to do this? Well, that's just what we always do. That's the standard. So that's what I got. So now we're producing something at a much higher level than we need to, and that is a waste. We're wasting the client's dollars that could be used preciously somewhere else instead of on this particular portion of the work. So maybe the architect didn't ask the right questions, made assumptions to go fast, didn't do a lot of things, but that is a simple example of where we're producing something at a higher level than what we require. It's the same thing when you're doing, like, let's say you're doing a report out or an RFP response, and what you're doing is you're putting together this whole book of things for somebody else to start reviewing. And instead of making it a draft, you produce what you think is the final product to hand to somebody and say, here, take a look at this. You're not you need to collaborate with this person, but what you're doing is you're producing what you think is the final product. Then you're opening them. So you've overproduced that product and not created a draft, but you're creating what you think is the finished end thing. You have not given anyone time to actually look at it, make adjustments, do those things like that. So the problem is you've overproduced, wasted your time doing this, knowing that you're now going to have to go back and make corrections. So that is another example of overproducing something and wasting your time and other people's time by looking at a product that isn't supposed to be done yet, but you wanted to make it done so it would be off your plate and hand to somebody else and make it their problem. All that's going to do is come back to you and make it your problem because you're going to have to fix something that you thought was done. So there's a couple examples of kind of us overproducing and going beyond what is required at that moment. Any other examples out there? Jen, I saw you on mute.
Yeah, I really quick, and not so much an example, but just to add to what you just said, I think we also we're not taking into account that when we do try to get to that point of perfection or get it perfect, and the time it takes to get there, and the time that then gets presented, like you said, and then there's going to be changes. I'm going to say most of the time when I experience this, because you took so long to get it to that final perfect state that it's not ever going to get to, in a silo, all the things around you kept moving forward. And then now you've kind of almost wasted that time because you are now having to either pivot or change, or things have happened around you that you didn't take into account because you wanted to get it so in that final state that really is not achievable with one person. So again, the importance of throwing those drafts out there, knowing that there's going to be things that are going to change in that constant state of that PDSA, you're going to be able to then continue moving things forward in a much better fashion.
Yeah, John, I see the same thing too with implementations of Last Planner systems. Some people that have learned and have lots of experience try to bring new teams right to where they are in time, and they kind of force they do a little push even with this pool system. And often it's good to just accept people where they are and just start rough and build and iterate on towards what helps the team. And if not all parts and pieces and super fancy charts and variance tracking is what you need to get alignment, then don't start there. So don't over process even in your lean tools. Thanks,
I'm a
John.
big fan of controlled chaos. And I know it sounds
Yeah,
crazy, but if I'm telling you, when you have a little bit of the control, you got the guardrails up, but you kind of let things happen, the stuff that comes out of that is way better than somebody sitting at a desk by themselves trying to anticipate everything that could happen.
I love that, Jen. Controlled chaos.
Yeah, when we start teaching Last Planner, the first thing I do is just let people out there, have them talk to each other and start to communicate, learn how to communicate. We talk about, is this just a communication tool? No, it's not, but communication is a huge element of that. So letting people just talk about and brainstorm on what's going on so we don't overproduce. One other way to look at LPS is if I was working on a project, it was like a 9-month project, and we felt like if we daily work plan things out for 6 weeks. It was too long for us. We thought that was not valuable. That would have been overproducing something because things were changing a lot. And so we said, let's do a 3-week micro look at the schedule and a 3-month macro look at the schedule. So we modified, let's say, quote unquote, modified the rules or did whatever because we didn't want to overproduce something that we were then going to have to consistently change based on the city's review of our project, et cetera. So we left that kind of the daily work planning down to about 3 weeks instead of 6 weeks. And we adjusted and made it a macro look at the next 3 months. So we knew what was coming still. We had that in mind, but we didn't want to overproduce on this daily work schedule that we're going to have to consistently change and waste a bunch of our time. And so we kind of modified and thought about, let's not be wasteful with our time. So that's the O in downtime is overproduction. The W, easy one. This is low hanging fruit. It's waiting. And we wait for everything we do on any project or anything we're working on in our personal lives, professional lives, whatever. We are always waiting for something. We're waiting for something. We wait in line for things. Waiting is a consistent thing that we're doing. And the question is, how do we get to a point where we're not waiting on projects for things, for the information we need, et cetera? How do we get to that level? And you're not going to start it on day one, just like we're talking about all these things. But I think if the idea of not waiting would be, have we created a culture of collaboration on our project teams where we bring the team together and we solve problems instantly while we're sitting at the meeting? We just review our submittals at the meeting rather than taking them back to our office, sitting down with them, leaving them on our desk for 3 weeks before we actually look at them. How can we adjust our mindset to do things in that instant and get them done so that we don't have to wait for the product to be delivered back to us? It's like doing meeting minutes while you're sitting in the meeting or right after the meeting. So take some quick notes and produce that document as soon as the meeting is over so that we have in real time, we have what we said we were going to do and what we decided and what we need to decide for next week. And we have that information at our fingertips immediately after the meeting rather than waiting until a week later, the night before the meeting occurs, for this document to come out. That's incredibly wasteful because you know what we just did? We waited an entire week. We hoped that everyone was taking their own notes to prepare for the meeting, and they probably weren't. So we're going to come unprepared for our next session. So why do we allow waiting to occur instead of doing things kind of in real time? When we are able to do them in real time, why aren't we doing them in real time? And so that's another waste that we see. And waiting is very simple. I mean, it's just we wait for everything that we do. Think about this one, right? How do you eliminate waiting from your daily work life or your daily life in general? What do you do as you're brewing your coffee in the morning? Do you just sit there and wait for the coffee and stare mindlessly into space, look at your phone, whatever you might do? Or are you doing something that's productive? Are you emptying the dishwasher? Are you filling the dishwasher? Are you doing something else? Are you making your breakfast? Are you doing something while the coffee is brewing that can cut down on the other things you have to do after you've made the coffee, let's say, right? So think about that. And I know it's a simple example, but man, it's powerful, especially as we teach our young people how to, cut down on these gaps in time where they're just sitting there wasting time. And so it's a great example of just doing something very simple. I think there's one out there about making toast, a video that you can watch on YouTube about making toast and the different ways to make toast that are more effective than others. Go ahead, Jen.
I just wanted to add to that too, and I think Felipe helped me with this. He helped me realize that sometimes the waiting is not something that we can control. If we're in an industry that is all the time, and I've had meetings where I get a text message going, hey, I'm in an OAC, it's run long, or hey, I just got pulled into a meeting with the owner. I mean, there's a lot of roadblocks and things that pop up. And so there's a lot of times that I have something scheduled, and and it's with people that sometimes their lives are a little bit crazy. And so I've put a kind of, what is that that timeline of, okay, I had a meeting, and they said, hey, I'll jump on. What is that time where I say, okay, I've got to move on to something else? And Felipe is helping me realize my time is valuable, and and that there are a lot of things that I need to make sure that I'm controlling. And how do I take control of that is, I have, for me, a 10-minute kind of that, I can keep working while I'm waiting for someone, but at 10 minutes we're going to reschedule. And for me, even though it's a little thing, I've realized that it doesn't make me have to continue with a block of time that could end up being a wasted block of time. So that's just one example personally that I've done with my work schedule, with the meetings and some of the things that I get pulled into.
Hey, when the teacher doesn't show up for class right away, I thought we had like a 10-minute grace period. I used to cut it down to like 5 minutes because I was like, I want to get out of there. But I've done that where I've walked into a meeting, and I'm not going to have a meeting just to have a meeting. Number one, if people aren't respectful about showing up on time, now it depends on who that is, right? If it's my client and I'm there at their behest, I get frustrated. I do a lot of things. I will, call them out on it. It depends on, so you have to be careful about that. And you're right, you can't control you actually can't control anything in your world, specifically if we really dig into that whole wormhole of conversation. But the idea behind, telling people, hey, you weren't respectful of my time, it's important, it's valuable, we're just going to reschedule. And so that's something that hopefully they won't do it again. So we're setting an expectation that we should be on time within the parameters of what happens in our world, but we need to be on time, and we need to be there when we said we're going to be there. So if it's a repeat occurrence, then you just need to go find somebody else to work with.
You're spot on, John. And I think in my example, one recently was, I'm really clear on, some of our executives, I know their time is busy, so I only set 15-minute meetings. Like, I just need to ask a question, get some information, and get off. And 10 minutes into the meeting, stopped it. 30 minutes later, I get a call, just a call on my phone going, hey, I'm available now. And I'm like, I'm not. Like, and it wasn't, not to be disrespectful. And sometimes they're just like, what? Like, but it's, you have to create those those parameters and those guardrails, because then, and again, Felipe, I know you're going to chime in at some point, but it's, if you don't set them, you will be pulled in 1,000 different directions at any given time, and then you are going to have no flow of what you're doing during the day, but also you're going to lose time trying to get pulled into other things when you've got to set those guardrails. You have to.
Time is the only resource we can't make more of, Jen. So we've got to protect it and use the time we have to do exactly what we need to do. I always like to go best values. So John, to go back to the coffee thing, Marcus would tell you just stop drinking coffee. But for those of us addicted to coffee, and I'm definitely in that camp, automate that process. So my coffee machine knows, because I've programmed it to make coffee for me, so that when I come downstairs, it's ready. There's no waiting. That's eliminated. Next.
Easy one. Yes, I told you it's low-hanging fruit. The waiting part can be low-hanging fruit, but it also can be one of the most challenging things that we're going to deal with.
Hey, can I add something really quick?
Go ahead, Brittanie. Yeah, go ahead.
Back to the example. We talked about smoothies earlier. You guys know we make smoothies. When I make one, I actually have a race with myself. Marcus usually washes the dishes, put them in the dishwasher, and I unpack it. So when I turn the smoothie machine on to run it, I race to quickly put everything away from the dishwasher. So I'm not having that downtime at all. Like, that is my co-activity. And normally I don't finish, but I'm so close that I just finish anyway after I'm done running the smoothie. And normally there's something in there in the dishwasher that I needed for the process anyway. So it works out perfectly. But like to your point, if you just think about, how can I make this a game? I think that also adds a little bit of a fun element to it.
Brittanie, I love that, and I knew we were already connected on 1,000 levels, and this is another one. But I do the exact same thing because I'm the one that unloads the dishwasher. So when I mean, even if I'm making eggs in the morning, it's like I put the eggs in the pan, and it's like, okay, let me unload the dishwasher fast enough to where I can get back over here before the eggs burn, and it gets things done quicker, and I feel like I'm maximizing that time. That's awesome.
So I think if we have these behaviors in our personal life, bringing them into our work life should be, that's our job as leaders, is to work with our young folks and the people that are around us to kind of set that same expectation. There's nothing wrong with having an open door policy as a leader, but also when somebody knocks on your door saying, "Give me 3 minutes and I'll get to you," when anyone asks for your time and they say, "Hey, do you have a quick second to talk?" Nothing takes 1 second. Insert joke here, but the basically say, "Hey, yeah, oh, thank you, Felipe. Yeah, that was a little late on the timing, but the think, give me 5 minutes and I'll get back to you." So finish what you're working on to keep your flow going. That's what Jen was talking about. So having an open door policy as a leader is totally fine, as long as you still can set the expectation and say, "I'm working on something. Give me 5 minutes and I'll come see you." Right? Or whatever it might be, or come back in 5 minutes and I'll be done and ready to talk to you. So that is setting an expectation there so that you're not interrupted and they can go along with their flow, is also something that works really well. All of these things tie into the next waste. So we've already gone through DOW. Now we're on the N, which is non-utilized talent. So N is probably the most important thing. Felipe started off this morning with last planner system, and Jen has followed it up with the idea that, remember who the last planners really are. And so when we think about the N and non-utilized talent, we've talked about this basically on every single lean construction roundtable we've had, about the idea of the talented people that are around us and how do we empower those people to speak up, to take accountability for their actions, to trust us, to trust the process, to how do we do that well as leaders? How do we implement this? And I always start with a very quick and easy plus delta. And I know Alan loves that, chimes in with that a lot, which is just do a plus delta at the end of your meeting and empower people to speak up about the things that they found were valuable and the things that they found that we need to adjust for next time. But then make those adjustments and show people that you're actually listening. We have an employee who doesn't eat cheese. And so we got some kind of breakfast sandwiches one morning, and there was one off to the side that I noticed had no cheese on it, right? So it was marked that way on the wrapper. And I was like, well, what are we doing? Why is that the case? Well, that one was for one of our employees. And what a powerful way to see that person and not just ignore what they asked as a request, as a delta on one meeting. We have now empowered that employee to show her that she's important, she's going to be listened to, and when other things come up along the way that are valuable to the company, to herself, whatever it might be, she's going to, I feel like we've given her the platform now to speak up about many different things, because this is maybe one of the hardest things that she had to speak up about, was her preference for a breakfast sandwich, right? In the grand scheme of a business plan, who cares? But we care. And we now empowered this employee to utilize her talents to better herself and the company, because we were able to see her as an individual, see what she wanted as a preference, and make that adjustment. So now we're able to take that waste of non-utilized talent and move it forward and utilize the talent of the spectacular people that work with us, around us. That is a very simple example, but man, it's powerful when you think about what we've created for that employee.
I have an awesome example, and only because it just happened last week to us. And it's exactly when I saw it, I was like, this is exactly, that waste that we've not even addressed. So last week did an alignment meeting, was in a room with three of our project teams, three very experienced superintendents, and it was our internal team just kind of talking through what our, the culture looks like, what is it going to look like with tools and things like that. And we went through like a 3 hour, everybody collaborating, doing all this stuff. And at the end, one of the superintendents goes, hey, I got something I want to show the group. And we're like, okay, that's cool. He pulls it up on the screen, and it about blew my mind. He was like, hey, I'm doing this project health thing. And so I have these Google forms, and every day by 9 o'clock, the lead on each of our trades fills out the form. And it's very basic, like, are you short on manpower today? Do you have any scheduled tasks for the week that's not being worked on? Do you have any problems with materials? Like very quick yes, no's. And then that immediately goes into a spreadsheet that highlights green, no issues, red, yes, they're having some issues, which then gets discussed at the stand up meeting. And it's displayed on a visual board that they see, anytime that they walk by. And it also translates into gauges that show red, green, yellow. Again, he has done this. We're doing this company wide for project stuff, but we're in a room where he's done all this work and he's doing it for his project. And our executive in the room, probably shouldn't say this, but our executive in the room goes, I didn't even know that you were into technology. Like it was literally it culminated into now we're getting him engaged with some stuff we're doing corporately with Project Health and how we're measuring it. But like no one knew that until we were in that room that he was doing this on one project of the 125 that we're doing. It was crazy, but it's like that's exactly an example of what we're talking about, how much waste, how much time is going into this right now. And he's kind of already pushed us forward 3 or 4 steps because of some of the things he's already done.
Well, and how cool, Jen, is it going to be when other people in the company and the organization see that this person, this employee, was now given the platform to say what his idea was, and we're going to do something about it. We're taking that, we're creating action off of it. So now we've empowered the rest of our staff to think about things and come up with great ideas that can improve what we are already doing. That's great. And so we give ourselves a platform for that. So we as an organization, we do something called we have a small wins kind of idea where we're looking at how are we helping the client with beneficial wins for them, and we categorize and we reward our employees for coming up with these great ideas. We also do something internally for IFS improvements, but that didn't start the day we started our lean journey. We had to create a culture where it was okay and acceptable to put in ideas, and any employee can submit these ideas to us as in ways to improve our organization. We've empowered our employees to be able to say that. The executive team reviews those things and determines, kind of at a high level, are we going to invest in this or not? And we typically say yes to almost every one. But the point is, we've given ourselves a platform like this gentleman did, where he had an idea. We've now taken and run with it in your organization, Jen. And what's great is other people will start to see this and want to do the same thing. So we're now creating a culture where people's talents will be utilized, will be noticed, will be seen, and then will actually be implemented and brought into the company. And there's plenty of great improvements out there that we can do that we don't even know about today because we haven't asked our staff what those things might be. The frontline workers, the people actually doing the work, we haven't asked them, how can that make your job better? How can I make you more productive? Whatever. And what a great way to lead from behind in that example, right? Where we're leading, we're saying, hey, you take the reins and run with this thing. You do the A3, you figure it out. It's great. I got the opportunity to go to Herman Miller's space and up in Michigan and walk through there and watch them assemble a chair of all the nerdy things you can do. So I'm sitting there watching them assemble the Aeron chair, and we're talking to the line manager, and she's like, well, I was like, why did they put that rubber band on this arm of this chair? And she goes, well, actually, I'm working on that. And this is a a woman who's part of the large or multi-million-dollar organization, whatever. She pulls out this A3 and she goes, "Well, actually, I'm working on this. Like, if we can devise a way to, not put this temporary rubber band on to hold a chair hold the arm on the chair before we put the screw in, it'll probably save us this." And you're saving ultimately probably in production time maybe a second per chair, but when you're producing a chair every 15 seconds, that's a lot of time and a lot of money saved. This worker was empowered as a line manager to just do this. The incentive was there just to say, this is the culture that's been created at this organization, that people are going to come up with good ideas to problem solve. And this is a problem they've had since they've started building this chair. And now and they've tried to solve it. She's taking another step forward to try to solve this problem because she's been empowered to do it. That is a great way to utilize the talent of these individuals that we have working in our spaces.
I just want to welcome Jenica to the stage. Or Janica to the stage. I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you. I sort of just came in, so I didn't understand how the lean construction had to deal with that chair. But thank you, John, for that explanation. I'm the founder of World Women Impacting Real Estate, and I work also with PropTech, which is a growing industry. 5 years ago, capital for PropTech was, I think, 20 or maybe 200 million. I know that's a big difference, but today, yes, I think today is over 200 million, and 5 years ago was 20 million. So of course it's, can you give me a guideline of what's being said here?
So, Janica, we're talking about, so we started off, we do this Lean Construction Roundtable every Thursday morning as part of the PropTech Club. And what we started off the morning talking about was something we call the last planner system. And it's really about how do we schedule projects more effectively? How do we do this both in design and in construction? And the last planner really is the person doing the work. This is not something dictated from up on high to say, here's what you're going to be doing today. The last planners are those that are out in the field doing the work. The foremen, the men and women doing the work, are actually taking accountability for the schedule and moving it forward. So then we got into that's one big element we talked about for the first hour or so. The second hour, we've really focused in on waste and identifying waste so that if we see it, now we can try to solve for it. And there's an acronym called downtime, which is DOWNTIME. And each one of those letters starts with is the start of a word that identifies one of the 8 wastes we see in construction, in production, in manufacturing, and all kinds of things. So we're on the N, which is non-utilized talent, and we're moving forward. So T is transportation. Transportation is the movement of materials on our project sites. So when we think about some examples of where we see transportation waste occurring. Think about when you walk on a project site and you see carts and material sitting on the floor, piles of drywall sitting on the floor, all kinds of things that are sitting out there that in most cases are very difficult to move because they're heavy, they're large, whatever. And so people bring these materials out to the job site and then leave them sitting somewhere in our spaces, and makes it difficult for us to work around. And it increases the chances that these items are going to be damaged. And so when we think about transportation of materials around a job site, we need to make sure that they are easily movable and that we're not bringing too many things onto the job site that we don't need at any one given time. So transportation and movement of materials on a job site needs to be very highly coordinated. It needs to be thought about. It needs to be talked about during those last planner system conversations as we're standing collaborating at our pull plan boards, and we're looking at all this information on our weekly work plan and daily work plans. How are we going to move materials around our job site? How are we going to focus on flow around the job site so that we don't have this clogged artery of a hallway full of gang boxes and all this crap that we can't even walk through, because that's not a good element of chaos. Like Jen was talking about chaos earlier in a controlled way. This is not a controlled level of chaos. This is just going to be a disaster that's going to cause what we talked about earlier, defects and all these other things. So think about how materials are transported around your project sites, and that's the T, transportation. So I'll stop there for a minute.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. But does this have something with property technology or on the internet basis? Because you sound very real day to day. And I would also like to remind that France is obliging all developers to use circular economy, and all of the social housing has to be dealt with. In fact, I'm amused. I live in a little small town, and there is a building that will be constructed for social housing, and they had to comply with circular economy. So as you said, there's a lot of still, there's a couple of bricks still laying on the ground, and the house was half. It was a house that was being destroyed, so half of the house is still there, and this has been going on for 3 months. So it's not very effective circular economy. And I think, so as the founder of World Women Impacting Real Estate, thanks to Clubhouse, I decided just to concentrate on sustainable real estate because, number one, it's fun and it's innovative. And there are a lot of women leaders that are doing it. So it was interesting about you speaking about that woman doing that chair. But I still don't see how it's related to the prop tech industry. So are you just off subject or?
Jenica,
Yeah.
Jenica, you're derailing the conversation.
No, I didn't want to
So,
derail the conversation. I
what
just
I,
wanted to understand if this was a prop tech room or not.
it so the discussions around lean construction and lean construction processes and tools. So technology is all technology is human assistant tools, and he's describing a way to make improvements, being able to use that. And so, can you use technology to be able to do that? Yes, you can. But at the same time, we're talking about methodologies that we can actually control ourselves as humans. And so, the beginning of the conversation was around downtime and how to make improvements as far as going through the 8 ways of construction. So, I would just suggest is to stay around to this conversation and try to get the feel of the room or the feel of the vibe of the room. I mean, I see that you're from Chicago, and a lot of other people who are up here are from that area as well. So just continue and participate in the conversation from that way.
Thank you. I am from Paris, France. I was just born in Chicago, but for me, prop tech is property technology on the internet. That's all. But thank you very much. I will listen. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, I think the point that we're and as Marcus said, technology is that next layer. So what we're trying to do with all of these things, a lot of good business practice and fundamentals they all start with human beings. We then can we find ways for technology to help improve what we're already doing, but we have to understand the fundamentals of how a process is going to happen and the human elements of those processes, because technology will not replace that. What it's going to do is help provide an assistant to that. And so when we think about lean construction and the foundations of that, when you think about how technology funnels into that, we start with, I go back to the Toyota production system. We talked about it earlier today. Toyota, as a multi-billion-dollar organization, has as one of their 14 principles talks about technology as not replacing the work, but helping assist the work. So the first thing we need to understand is, what is the work, what are we doing, and how do we eliminate waste? And then we will ultimately find ways, either with technology, good business practice, fundamentals, etc., and the human beings that we have working with us, we will find ways to become more efficient. And technology is one of those ways to do that. And so I think the next step in our downtime acronym, moving away from transportation, the next one is inventory. So the I is inventory. And so we're getting close to the end here, but inventory really is, when you think about inventory, is that really the materials that sit on our job sites? Is inventory, but inventory I look at also can be the built environment that we're working in. So if I'm producing something, let's say a medical office building that has 25 exam rooms in it, if I frame out and produce all 25 exam rooms, and then I need to make a change, I've now produced way too much inventory, and I have to go back and change all of that inventory if there is an adjustment that needs to be made in the planning or in the design, whatever. And so, how do I allow my client to see this space before they take the space over? And doing mock-ups and things like that allow us to build in maybe one completed and finished space in some level that then allow me to then go and produce the rest of the product. And so think about that when we're thinking about our construction sites. How do we not build in too much inventory in the built environment and get ahead of ourselves? That's something a lot of teams don't think about when they think about inventory. They're going to think about, how many screws do I have in my, on my cart, or how many light bulbs do I have, or light fixtures, whatever. But think about the built environment and how much inventory we're building in to allow for change or adjustments, because those things are going to happen. Clients change their mind, things happen, adjustments need to be made. And how do we do that effectively without wasting a lot of time and money?
John, I just want to add to that. Just again, I think it's a whole nother roundtable, so I don't want to dig into it too much. But that offsite production and what that looks like when it comes to prefab, modular, all those things that can happen offsite, whether it's an offsite warehouse or offsite manufacturing. Just another opportunity there to eliminate some of that onsite inventory, and also just the opportunity for things that could get, just that can hit all the other waste as well. And then the other one is that, that kind of that just-in-time delivery of how are things getting delivered on site, what's getting delivered, and where it's getting delivered on the site, so that we don't, continue to move it 2 or 3 times before it gets put in place. Those are 2, specific examples that I feel, again, could probably be an entire roundtable in itself. But those are ones that kind of hit that piece directly.
Yeah, a friend, Paul Doherty, who sometimes visits every once in a while, just got a Forbes article just promoted about his company. Well, one of the companies that he partners with are able to build homes within 7 minutes, which is pretty amazing with offsite construction.
Yeah, I mean, offsite production and offsite, kind of taking that constructed world and moving it somewhere else, so that we have these modules or elements that we've done this for a long time. We've prefabbed things for a long time. I think about prefabrication as building a millwork cabinet. That isn't built on my project site. I prefab it somewhere else, and I bring it out and I hang it on the wall. So inventory can happen in a lot of ways, but in a global market, sometimes when we see the ship, literally the container ship being stuck, that is going to affect that's going to affect us on our project sites. So sometimes having inventory within our spaces is okay. I think we got to think about that. We got to think about, like, when are we going to keep the rules of not having any inventory on our project sites, and when are we going to break those rules because we know that I need these head walls for my hospital project, and if I don't order them now, I'm not going to get them in time. So thinking about that, where can I manufacture them and store them so I don't have issues? So that's one way to do this. Let's go to M. M is motion. So we talked about transportation of the movement of materials. Motion is the movement of manpower and our men and women on our project sites, so the movement of people on our project sites. So we got to think about how are we moving materials with transportation, how are we moving people with in the M in motion. Again, this is a focus on flow. So when I look at a last planner system setup, and Felipe, Jen, those that have experience doing this, will see there has to be a floor plan somewhere indicating how we're moving and how we're flowing around this job site. What is the setup, area A, B, C, D, whatever you want to say, but if we don't have the floor plan showing how we're moving around the site, how are we going to expect people to move efficiently and effectively around our project sites? And so motion is a big thing. The other thing is motion when it comes to where do we do our setup for like a cut room for our mill workers, or where do we thread our pipe for our sprinkler fitters? Do we allow that to happen right at the workspace, or do we have to go somewhere else to produce that and then bring it back to our job site? And so think about motion as another way of like how do we get people to move in and out of our sites effectively without causing problems and all the other downstream things that we just talked about. And then the last one is extra processing. So we've finished downtime E. The E is extra processing. And extra processing really centers around the idea of, again, how many people need to do something or touch something within the process for the process to be finished. And I would, I was working with a general contractor team, and they were telling me about a process where they were describing their process for creating a set of meeting minute documents to be sent out. And they indicated to me that 3 people touched that document before it went out the door, out of their company's office. 3 people have to touch a set of OAC meeting minutes before it leaves their office. Do we think that there's a little bit of extra processing going on there? Is that really necessary? Is that valuable to the people that are going to receive that document, that 3 people from the general contractor's office had to touch that document and look at it before it could be sent out? So that's something to think about as well, extra processing. And how do we do this effectively? How do we empower our people to be able to send something out knowing that it's correct, or at least that it's their voice that's being described on that document, that we don't need to check the checker?
I just want to add that I got 2 specific things that I think will help anyone that's listening that, trying to understand extra processing. One example is an activity. If you can think about like an Olympic pool, and there's different lanes for every person swimming. If you think about the swim lanes, and you kind of turn it sideways, and you make it where they're going left to right, and you put every person that has to touch any document, any approval, anything that has to go through multiple phases before it can get to the end, and it can actually happen. If you stop and you put everyone that's going to touch it on the left side down, and each one of them has a lane, and you start with the first person, and then you dot through those lanes everywhere that document or that approval or that conversation has to go before it gets out at the end, and you see that, and you realize the lack of flow or the flow or all the people that touch it, and then you start having the conversations on who needs to touch it. What does it really need to go through all those hands? Or if it hits somebody 3 times, is there a way to not hit him the first 2 times and let it go through these other people before it hits them at the end? So again, it's a visual way to look at a process, but you will also start seeing the waste in that process, because people are touching it, but it's still changing. And so again, we talked about that at the very beginning on just decisions and how we wait so long before we give somebody something, or we wait, or they touch it 1,000 times. Just look at that visually and start eliminating places that really it's added nothing. And then the other, again, too, is 2 questions to ask whenever you start something is, what decisions can you make yourself, and what decisions do you need to get from other people? And when you start asking those questions too, I think it starts helping drive, what that flow looks like with that extra processing.
Jen, to piggyback off that, one of the things that um, I learned from an it was like I went it was like a team coach, but within working at a nuclear power plant, basically they put everybody in a circle, based off their roles, whatever. And the question that they asked and they passed the ball around was, in order to do my job better, the person before me needs to do X. And you got to learn about some of the um, things that you could do to help your teammates out. And I found that, coming from a sports background, I appreciated it as well. But it allowed you to start thinking about your job and your role within the group a little bit differently, of how to be able to, like, really impact the team and go for team success instead of just worrying about your own individual like role.
Absolutely. Yeah. How do we? So I think what Marcus, what we found is that all these things tie together in some way. So when you think about extra processing and what Jen was talking about, we had something where we were every invoice that left our office had to go through the president's desk in our project management software. So he saw every single invoice that came out of our office, whether it was $100 or $100,000 or $1,000,000. How impactful or valuable is that to the organization that we're sending these invoices to? And we didn't have a clear expectation. We just said, well, that's what the client wants. So then we looked at, is this valuable? Let's look at the value stream and see if the time we're spending processing invoices is valuable. And we found that there was extra processing. So then we empowered our workers at certain levels. We talked to the client and said, hey, if an invoice is under a certain dollar amount, do we need to have all these layers to do this? So we eliminated the extra processing out of it and we cut the layers down to a smaller level. We empowered our project executives at a certain dollar level to be able to final approve an invoice from their project management team and send it on. So we number one, we started utilizing the talent of our president of our company, and we also started utilizing the talent of this really intelligent people we had sitting around the table that were working at our project executive level that are getting paid to make decisions like that. And so we were able to eliminate the waste of extra processing by um, by doing that. So I think what we find is that all of these things are intertwined together. The entire waste spectrum of downtime is tied together. And I think one thing to leave with is when we when I find that we can find an improvement in something, what I like to do is on the side of that, if I've made an improvement in a process or something, I like to put in the notes or in the footnotes or wherever you want to put it that says these are the wastes that were eliminated when we solved this problem. And so it's a great way for us to identify what did we solve? When we solved this issue, what wastes were eliminated when we solved that issue? And so that's it's a great takeaway for the team to say, look at all the things that we did by improving something in our daily process. So I think with that, that kind of concludes it. I don't know, Marcus, Brittanie, if you want to add anything else, but I know that a number of people have had to run off to phone calls and other meetings for the day. So, and I need to do the same thing, but it was a really fantastic room today and appreciate the time and everyone's participation.
Yeah, I think we did. It was. I'm appreciative of Felipe's input and Brittany's input before they had to head off and go and do meetings. John, thank you for going. We kind of hybrided and combined two things that we were going to talk about, which is between the blast planner system and how to implement that, and as far as the current constraints that are going on, as far as lack not as much. I would say qualified talent within the construction industry, and using some of these tools can actually be able to save projects up to 4 months of time. And Felipe talked about another project that was being able to save almost over $1 billion. And then we and talked about downtime. So Thank you, John, for being able to put that together. Uh, we don't have enough people on the stage to really do plus deltas go around. But if you do have anything, John, of what went well or what didn't go so well, please.
Yeah, I would say, Marcus, the idea behind putting this out there, I like that we broadcast this out to many people, and I think adding in the topic of what we're going to discuss today in our description of the meeting is really, or the discussion of the event today is really important. So, I think we'll brainstorm on that as we move forward. But I think having that topic out there as part of the roundtable that says, "Here's what we're going to discuss today," will actually shed some light on the different things that they're going to talk about. So, appreciate the time.
Thanks, John. Sana, if you're still here.
Oh, I'm here. Oh, yeah, I agree. Just what John said as well there, right? It was so great. We had a great experience. We were sharing, and I always love when we have real examples because that's where I get inspired. So.
Yeah. Yes, I concur. That was a great discussion today. Thank you for Felipe. Thank you for John. I enjoyed listening to that, and I think the takeaway we can get from here is we can do better in terms of engaging people, respecting people, and trusting people, and that's the key. Keep on fighting. Jen is not here, but she's a pioneer to fighting for changing that culture. And as she said, it's a long way. It's not just a flip of a button. Well, thank you all and have a good day.
All right. Well, thank you everyone who has attended, and Alan for staying as long as you have. Thank you very much. Yeah, looking forward for the next weeks. Bye.
Bye.